Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Things Written. Today, we're going to be talking about Jehovah's Witnesses and blood. New light doesn't bring back the dead. One of the most deadly religious policies in modern history has been changed. After nearly 75 years, the Watchtower organization, the governing body behind Jehovah's Witnesses, has quietly tweaked its blood doctrine. A policy that has cost an untold number of lives has been revised. Not abandoned, but modified. Now we're going to walk through exactly what changed, why the biblical arguments behind it never held up, and what it means that an organization can speak in God's name for 3/4 of a century and then simply move the goalposts after the damage is done. Now, this is not a minor adjustment. This is not like changing a meeting schedule, allowing beards, or deciding whether a toast is now a conscience matter. The blood doctrine is one of the most consequential teachings in the history of any religious modern movement. It has shaped decisions made in hospitals, in operating rooms, in emergency wards. It's affected adults, it's affected children, it's affected parents standing beside beds, watching someone they love trying to be faithful to what they had been taught was God's requirement, Jehovah's requirement. For decades, accepting a blood transfusion was not simply discouraged, it was treated as a violation of divine law, grounds for being disfellowshipped, cut off from family and community. Also, one would be seen as getting the mark of the wild beast, according to the book of Revelation. But now part of that policy has changed. Now, some time ago, blood fractions became a conscious matter. Certain procedures have over time become conscious matters, and now you can store your own blood, drawing and storing it before surgery and returning it to you has now joined that list of conscience matters. Now, if these things can be a matter of personal conscience now, why were they treated as a violation of God's law before? Did anything in Genesis change? The book of Leviticus, Acts chapter 15? No, the text didn't change. Just the man-made policy did. And that's not a small problem. It's a moral problem. Because a religious organization that can take a disputable interpretation, attach God's name to it, enforce it as divine law, and then quietly revise it after people have obeyed and suffered is not merely mistaken. It is dangerous. Now, what do the Bible texts actually say? The passages that doctrine rests are on Genesis 9, Leviticus 17, and Acts 15. In Genesis, the command is not to eat flesh with blood still in it. In Leviticus, Israel is told not to eat blood because it belongs to God. It is placed on an altar to make atonement. In Acts 15, Gentile Christians are told to abstain from blood in the context of first century controversy with Jewish Christian table fellowship and idolatry. Now, these were not casual instructions. Food laws carried enormous weight in the ancient world, but their seriousness does not change their category. These are dietary and ritual commands, and a dietary command is not the same thing as a prohibition on emergency medicine. So what we have here is fundamentally a category mistake. Eating blood and food and receiving blood medically to preserve life are not the same category of action. Treating them as identical simply because the word blood appears in both is not careful Bible interpretation. It is a category mistake, a deadly one. Leviticus instructs that certain fat belong to God and must not be consumed. It was to be offered on the altar. But by that same reasoning the Watchtower applies to blood, you would have to conclude that liposuction violates God's law. Fats being removed from the body and discarded rather than treated as something sacred. Nobody believes that. Nobody would argue it. But the method of interpretation being used is identical to the one applied to blood transfusions. Or take the biblical laws about clean and unclean animals. Certain creatures were forbidden to be eaten. Does that mean a veterinarian cannot treat those same animals medically? Of course not. The prohibition is about consumption, not medical contact. The law governs the dinner table, not the operating table. Same animal, completely different act. Or consider that the Bible forbids consuming blood because life is sacred. And yet the Watchtower uses that same principle to prevent a medical procedure designed specifically to preserve life. The logic falls back on itself. The shared word doesn't make the action the same. The context changes everything. An operating room is not a dinner table. A transfusion is not a meal, and a surgery is not a banquet. The Bible's blood commands address food, slaughter, sacrifice, and worship. Modern transfusion medicine is a later medical reality being forced into ancient ritualistic language, and people have died because of that forced fit. Now, we'll address this alcohol analogy. I remember as a Jehovah's Witness using this quite often. Now, the Watchtower literature offers an analogy. If a man is told to abstain from alcohol, would he really be obeying if he had it injected into his veins rather than drinking it? The point? The method of entry doesn't change the violation. At first, that sounds compelling, but only at first. The analogy assumes that abstain means avoiding every possible use of a substance in every possible context. That is not how abstinence works. If someone told you to abstain from alcohol, he should not drink it. But does that mean a nurse violates the command when she cleans his skin with an alcohol swab before an injection? Of course not, because purpose matters, use matters, context matters. The analogy also assumes what it's trying to prove. It starts from the conclusion that if transfusion is the same kind of act as consuming blood, and builds an illustration around the consumption. But that is precisely the question at issue. Acts 15 is not addressing red blood cells, plasma, trauma care, blood storage. It's addressing blood in the context of food, idolatry, and first century table fellowship. The question was never, did blood enter the body? The question is, what kind of act is being performed? Eating blood as food is one moral category. Receiving blood medically to preserve life is another. Collapsing those categories doesn't settle the argument, it simply avoids it. Now let's get into the life as a symbol, but used against the actual life. Jehovah's Witnesses argue that blood represents life. That is why it's sacred, why it belongs to God. The argument is rooted in reverence. But if blood represents life, why would the symbol of life be used to justify refusing a procedure intended to preserve actual life? In the biblical texts, blood is treated as sacred because life is sacred. The symbol points to the value of life. But in Watchtower doctrine, the symbol is protected, while the life is represented is endangered. The sign becomes more important than the person. That contradiction becomes more serious when children are involved. An adult refusing treatment for himself is one kind of moral and legal question. But when parents, elders, and organizational representatives stand around a child's hospital bed and allow theology to override potentially life-saving care, the weight of that question shifts enormously. Who speaks of the child? Who speaks for the patient who might still be alive if yesterday's forbidden procedure had already been reclassified as today's conscience matter? The policy changed. As significant as it is, it cannot be called a resolution. It is also an indictment. It proves that the organization can change its rules. It can move something from forbidden to permitted. It can take what is treated as a violation of God's law and quietly reframe it as a matter of individual conscience. But if these things can be conscience matters now, why were they not conscience matters before? And if they were always matters of conscience, why were witnesses taught to treat them as divine prohibitions? New light is the phrase the organization uses when a teaching changes. The idea that God progressively reveals truth and understanding deepens over time. There is a place for that concept in honest theology, but it cannot carry the moral weight being asked of here. When a teaching governs life and death decisions for decades and then shifts after people have already obeyed and suffered under its new light, It is not the answer. It is an evasion. New light does not return the dead. New light does not return the option to patients who are told God had forbidden them. New light does not restore the years to families who made the decision in good faith under a rule the organization has now revised. New light does not remove the responsibility of those who spoke in God's name. What does this change reveal? The Bible did not change. Genesis 9 did not change. Leviticus 17 did not change. Acts 15 did not change. What changed was the organization's interpretation, and with it, the lives of people who never got the chance to choose differently. The people who paid the price for the old rules deserve more than silence, more than a revised paragraph, more than an assurance that the light simply got a little brighter after the damage was already done. The rules changed. The Bible didn't. And the dead cannot revise that outcome. Now, we often speculate as Jehovah's Witnesses, when are they going to get rid of this? I remember Barbara Anderson some time ago had some insights on it was almost turned at one time. They almost got rid of it, and then in 2001, then evidently 9/11 happened, and they kind of ditched that. And there's a liberal branch that got hustled out quickly, and the conservatives took hard approaches as they have in the past in Watchtower world. But now things seem to have changed, and all these new changes. The light ones like beards and, toasting. That's interesting. Pants and things, making it easier, lower the R requirements. It's easy to be a Jehovah's Witness, especially on the young ones, right? Because they had the horrible retention rates, right? So they got to make it easy. So they're lowering their standards. But this one, obviously, we can be thankful for. The community here should be proud of the fact that pressure from former members and society in general has caused them to change the policy that's going to save lives at the end of the day. And let's just hope that policy continues to shift till they abandon this deadly doctrine. So thanks again for joining me here on Beyond the Things Written. Remember, do not be afraid of them or what they say. And I hope you'll join us again next time.